Welcome back to another Shir of Money Matters. This is Shir number 22. Ilu Nishmat Rachalea Bat Reb Chaim Tzvi. In today's Shir, I want to get into the subject of corporations, limited liability, how in halakha do we treat such companies, but also, and the two things are bound together, I want to discuss the problem, the issue of buying and selling, of dealing in treif, in non-kosher products, or also of dealing on Shabbat. As far as, and we'll discuss not only the problem of doing the bit, everyone knows you're not allowed to do business on Shabbat. But the question is, what's going to be connected here is if you're a partner in a company that is doing business on Shabbat, where there are non-Jewish partners, where there are, non-religious Jews, but the partners that are working the business on Shabbat, and you as a religious Jew are a partner with them, or where you're a shareholder, or a major shareholder, or a minority shareholder, or just a little investor on the stock market that holds shares in companies that are doing selling treif, selling things that Jews don't eat. Is there a problem with all this? First of all, let's make it clear what the issur is. There is a problem, there is an issur for a Jew to do business on a regular basis in foodstuffs which it's prohibited for a Jew to eat. We're only talking about foodstuffs which is prohibited by the Torah for a Jew to eat. That would mean, of course, all the types of meat that are not kosher, and anything that hasn't been shechted the way it should have been shechted, even if it is kosher meat, all these things you're not allowed to eat according to the Torah. All these things a Jew is not allowed to do regular business in. I say regular business because, of course, if you have a slaughterhouse, a Beit Shchita, a good Jewish slaughterhouse, they're going to have animals that they didn't shecht properly, unfortunately, and they came out treif for whatever reason, and what are they going to do? They don't have to throw them away. They're certainly allowed to sell them to non-Jews, who for them there's no problem with eating such meat. So that's doing business with treif, isn't it? But that's permitted because it's not their regular business. We're talking about regular business. We're talking about a supermarket that's selling non-kosher food. To own a supermarket, that would be a problem. Okay? If the issur is only rabbinical, if it's only derabanan, then you're allowed to do business in it. But if it's d'oraita, if it's from the Torah, you're not allowed to do business in such food products that are also from the Torah. Right? Okay. Why? Why did Chazal, it's a rabbinical issur, the whole thing, why did they also this? Why did they say that a Jew is not allowed to do business in non-kosher food? There are two reasons mentioned. One reason is that maybe by being involved you might come to eat yourself from this food stuff. Another problem is that even if you don't, people might say or might think that if seeing as you're holding shares, certainly you must be, you're not holding shares, seeing as you're doing business in these products, certainly you're eating these products. You can already understand, you can already hear from what I mentioned about shares as well, that where you're a shareholder, these two reasons are slightly less, but no plug rabbanon, they didn't make a difference. Just like a silent partner in a business. In the time of Chazal, a silent partner who stays at home all day but owns 50% of a shop that's selling treif has a problem and is not allowed to do that business. So too a shareholder, even though he's sitting in his house and could be the businesses on the other side of the country. Okay, dealing on Shabbat, we all know that's a problem. But let's just mention the halakha that we mentioned before, that any business that is done on Shabbat is binding. You can't cancel a deal by claiming that the deal was done on Shabbat. The deal is a binding deal. Now, what's our big question? Our big question is going to be investing in companies like this. Investing or owning. Doesn't make any difference. Are you allowed to invest in such a company? First of all, we're going to have to differentiate between different types of investment. There are a number of ways you can invest in a company. Let's take the first case. Let's say someone who owns a supermarket that's selling non-kosher food wants from you a loan. Do you have a problem giving them a loan, a big loan? There's no problem giving them a loan. If the owner is a non-Jew, certainly there's no problem giving a loan, because by giving a loan, you do not become a partner in the business. The fact that he's going to be repaying the loan from money that was earned in a shop that sells non-kosher food is not a problem in halakha. It's not a problem. You have no problem. You can make a loan to this guy without any problem at all. Where's the problem going to come? The problem is going to come if this shop is owned by a Jew. If it's owned by a Jew, now if you could just give him a loan, if you're giving him an interest-free loan, here too there's no problem. And again, it doesn't bother me, the halakha, the strict letter of the law, it doesn't bother me that he's going to be repaying that loan with money that was earned against the halakha. The money is not tainted money. There's no issa hanor here. The money doesn't become tainted, and he can repay the loan with money that he earned, however he earned it. The problem is going to be because of another problem, which has to be taken into account. The problem is that seeing as this loan is made to a Jew, if you want interest, you're going to have a heter iska. A heter iska, we've mentioned it in earlier shiurim. I think in the next shiur, Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to be getting much more into explaining exactly how a heter iska works. But the thing with a heter iska is that a heter iska, instead of a loan, you become an investor, you become a partner. You become a partner, and instead of receiving interest, you receive a share of profits. Now, even though you don't have a say in what's being done, that means that you're a partner in the business. The money that you lent him, that he's investing in buying merchandise, which is some of the unkosher merchandise, you're a partner in that merchandise. That's what the heter iska says. So if you lend money to a Jew who is running a non-kosher supermarket, and that loan is done with a heter iska, if it's not done without a heter iska, you've got a problem of interest. If you're giving an interest-free loan, gesundheit. If you're giving a friend loan, you're getting interest, you've got a problem of interest here. You have to have a heter iska. By having a heter iska, you now become a partner in what he's doing. You have to know what he's doing. You have to be careful that if he's doing business in a non-kosher shop, that you don't want part of that. Right? So you have to be careful about that. That can be a problem, even though you would say giving a loan, what can be the problem? You can see here there is a problem even in giving a loan to a non-religious Jew that is running a business that's dealing in non-kosher food. Later on we'll be discussing some ways that we can solve these problems, get around these problems a little bit, but for the moment we're just presenting them. So stay tuned until the end, right? Don't turn off in the middle, because you're going to miss something important, because there are ways that we can get around these problems. Now, that's giving a loan. The second way you can be involved, you can invest in such a company, is if you're a partner. You could be a partner with a non-Jew, and then we're going to have to see that if business is being done in things that are also according to the Torah, you're not allowed to eat them according to the Torah, then just as we find for Shabbat that partnership with a non-Jew can be used, that you can split up earnings, that the non-Jew works on Shabbat and the Jew works during the week against that day, and profits can be divided, and the business can work 7 days a week. We'll explain it in more detail later on in today's shiur, Bezrat Hashem. So too, with doing business in treif, the same thing can be done. That if all the treif products belong to the non-Jew and the kosher ones belong to the Jew, then this problem can be solved in some. Again, we're going to explain that later. But a partnership, if it's certainly with a partnership with Jews, even if you're just a partner, let's talk about you. Let's just talk about you for the moment. For you to be a partner in a business with other Jews that's doing business is a problem. okay, if it's doing business on Shabbat, or if it's doing business in non-kosher food. And we're going to have to see later on how to deal with that. By being a partner, I mean at the moment being a partner in something that is not a corporation. The third type of investment that we know is going to be the shareholder in a corporation. Now, you can have a private corporation or a public corporation. A private corporation, I mean one whose shares are not dealt with on the stock exchange. And a public corporation, I mean a company, a corporation whose shares are dealt with on the stock exchange. Generally with a private corporation, however much you hold, you have a say in what's going on, because generally they don't have very many shareholders. So you certainly have a say in what's going on. You're considered a partner. I think we mentioned it in the last year, that we lift up the corporate veil. We look at who the shareholders are. If there are Jews there, then it's a Jewish company. So if you've got Jewish partners, then it's a Jewish company, and you have to be careful about being a partner, being a shareholder, in a private company that's doing business either on Shabbat or in Treif. Now, where it's a public company whose shares are dealt with on the stock exchange, here we get into a very, very interesting and difficult area, because we all own shares. Many, many people, thousands, millions of people own shares in all sorts of companies, and they might own them just for a little while. They're buying and selling all the time. There's no way you can know. I mean, you can know. You can get a list of shareholders from any company you like, from any public company. But it's not the sort of work that anyone's going to do, to sit down and check and go through and check if there are Jews holding a little 100 shares here and 1,000 shares here. Little Granny Cohen has got 1,000 shares in Chase Manhattan, so now Chase Manhattan, because of little Granny Cohen, becomes a Jewish bank. It's difficult to understand. We have a tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein said that with a public company, small investors, people like you and me, maybe not you, I don't know, people like me, small people who just have a couple of 100 shares or 1,000 shares here and there in a public company, that does not make you a partner. It works both ways. That means that according to this psak of Moshe Feinstein, you are allowed to own 1,000 shares in a company that either does business on Shabbat or deals in non-kosher food. And there's no problem with that. When is there a problem? When your holding becomes significant. When you have a significant holding. Even though you're going to be called every year to vote to choose the new directors for the company for the next year. So you are participating in the business of the company by having that vote. Seeing as all it is a vote once a year, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, that does not make you a partner in the business. Okay? So with those holdings, there's no problem. Even though you have a vote, there's no problem. Again, when is there a problem? When you have, in inverted commas, a significant holding. The problem is Rav Moshe Feinstein doesn't explain to us what a significant holding is. Where is this border that holding more than that number of shares becomes a problem? What I tell people is that, seeing as according to the rules of the stock exchange, once you've bought more than 2%, I think it is, you have to declare your intentions. Anyone who buys more than 2% of a public company has to declare their intentions, whether they're planning on taking over the company, whether they're planning on buying more shares. That boundary, that 2% would be the limit. That more than that would be considered a significant holding in the company, and there you wouldn't be able to hide behind this tshuva of Moshe Feinstein and say that I'm not a partner in the business, therefore I can hold shares in a company that's doing business on Shabbat or in non-kosher food. Now, any public company has, apart from voting shares, they have non-voting shares. sometimes they're called preference shares, sometimes they're called debentures, loan stocks, whatever you call them. If they're not voting shares, then you're not you're not one of the partners. You'd have no say in what's going on. So that's like a loan. The owning of preference shares is like you're given a loan to the company. The owning of debentures or loan stock, it's like you've given a loan to the company, which before, like we said before, there's no problem, unless again there's a heta iska. Where there's a heta iska, you have a separate problem. That the heta iska makes you a partner in whatever they're buying with the money that you're investing in them. Okay, let me just mention why can't the halakha look at a corporation as a corporation? Why can't we treat it as it is? Why do we have to say no, it's a partnership? Because in halakha we don't find anywhere that it's possible to separate the liability of the borrower from the lender. Anyone who lent, what's the law? If you lend money, let's say you lent $100,000 to a corporation, and the corporation goes bust, and the corporation only has $50,000 to give you back. You take that $50,000 back, and that is it. You are not allowed to go to the shareholders and make them pay you the extra 50. The shareholder's obligation is limited. That's the whole thing of limited liability. Their liability is limited to the assets of the company. So where the company just has $50,000 to pay you back, that's all you can take, and they have no obligation at all. They have no personal obligation to make good the debt. That is something that there is no such thing in halakha. Anywhere that there is a debt, there has to be a personal obligation of someone to repay that debt. And so that's why we have to look at this like a company. Now, despite this, I must say now straight away that where that situation were to happen, where no criminal, I think criminal was done, in that situation where there was 100,000 debt from the company, and the company only has 50,000 to cover its debts. I said that the owner of the company, the shareholders, have no personal obligation. They don't have to sell their house to pay that other $50,000. That also is halachically valid. This might seem a bit of a contradiction, but that is halachically valid, because here there's a different principle of Jewish halakha comes into play. That when you, as the lender, are doing business with my corporation, you know that there's limited liability. You know that you're not going to be able to come to me if, God forbid, the company goes bust, and you can only take half of your debt, 50,000, from the assets of the company. You know that you can't come to the owner of the company afterwards to get the rest of the money. So it's as if you accepted that on yourself. It's as if you are mochel, and you gave up, and you realized by doing business with this corporation, you have accepted on yourself that you have no personal claim on the shareholders of the company. So on the one hand, we're saying that such a thing cannot exist in halakha. That's why we say we can't look at a corporation as a corporation. We lift the corporate veil, we say no, it's a partnership. But on the other hand, actually the limited liability does exist. The limited liability does exist because when you lent money to that company, seeing as you knew that you were dealing with a company with limited liability, it says on all their paperwork that they have limited liability, you know that if they go bust, you're only going to be able to get the money from the assets of the your money back from the assets of the company, and you can't go to the shareholders. So therefore we say you accepted that on yourself, you're mochel, and so bemet you have no personal claim on the shareholders. That's why you get the absurd situation of people that have gone bust, driving around still in their Rolls Royces and living in fancy houses, because the company went bust, they didn't go bust. They're a separate entity. Okay. let's go on. That's from Moshe Feinstein's psak. It's a very important psak for businessmen today and for our business world. That a small shareholder is not considered a partner in the company. But there are poskim that disagree with this. Very important poskim. The Minchat Yitzchak, Rav Weiss used to be the Ravid of the Badatz in Israel. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He has a tshuva that he says that anyone who has a voting right, that even means little Mrs. Granny Cohen, who has 100 shares in Chase Manhattan, even anyone who has a voting right and is allowed to vote to choose the directors of the company once a year, they are considered as a partner, they are considered as an owner, and therefore, according to that, there would be a serious problem in owning shares in a company that deals on Shabbat, or a company that's dealing in treif food. According to this psak, everyone has to check their portfolio very carefully. This is the Maisa, this is what's behind. There's in Israel right now, there's a new hechsher that's coming out, a financial hechsher. This is the opinion that's behind that. It's all based on this. As according to Moshe Feinstein, there's no problem. Okay? What anyone should do, you'd ask your rabbi what you're supposed to do. Now, let's talk about investment funds and pension funds. We all have them. Here, the shares that are owed, the stocks and shares that are owed by the investment fund, and you're getting a share of those profits, your portfolio goes up and down according to how those shares go up and down. You have a unit. They have a fund. A bank would have, or an investment company who has a fund. That this fund is called the A fund. Right? The A fund is going to be buying shares in real estate, in China, in South Africa, diamonds. They have all types of things that this A fund is going to be investing in. You buy a unit in the A fund, or a couple of units, or 1,000 units. You buy a unit in the A fund. Now, when all these shares that this investor is buying and selling, they go up or they go down, you get a share of the profits. But in actual fact, as long as those shares are not on your name, I'm giving money to the A fund, and I've bought a unit, or 10 units, or 1,000 units, that unit is made up of shares in a number of companies. The official owner of those shares is the company, it's the investment company, not me. So here, there's an extra barrier between me and the company, me and the company as a shareholder. So here, surely it should be that there's no problem at all, because even if the investment company is investing in businesses that are doing business on Shabbat, a Jewish business, of course, is doing business on Shabbat, or any business that's doing business on Shabbat is probably to be an owner of it, or a company that's dealing in non-kosher food. In any of these things, I am not the owner of the share. The investment company owns the shares. I'm just getting benefit from how those shares perform, going up and down on the market. So here, with a pension fund and with an investment fund, there's much less of a problem. Now, you'd have to look at carefully at the conditions of the pension fund and see really who is the owner of those shares legally, because that's what's going to decide this question here. As long as you are not legally the owner of those shares, then even according to the Minchat Yitzchak, according to Rav Weiss, there would be no problem of you holding of that pension fund owning shares in businesses that are doing business on Shabbat or doing business in treif. That's what it should be. Now, what about doing business on Shabbat? Let's say you're a partner with a non-Jew, and the non-Jew wants to run the business on Shabbat as well. How do you do this? The way you do it is like this. You have to make a condition with your non-Jewish partner can also bring in a non-Jewish partner for this. You have to make a condition with your non-Jewish partner that on Shabbat he's working by himself, and all the profits, all the earnings of Shabbat are his alone. Against that, the Jew is going to work on Sunday or Monday, one other day of the week. It doesn't make any difference which day. One other day the Jew is going to work against the Shabbat when the Goy is going to work. And all the profits of Shabbat belong to the non-Jew. And all the profits against that of Sunday or Monday belong to the Jew. Now, and it has to be possible to make a detailed calculation of exactly what was earned on Shabbat and exactly what was earned on Sunday or Monday. That in our time, in our computerized times, is no problem at all. Right? You just press a few buttons on the till and everyone can know exactly what was earned on Shabbat and exactly what was earned on Sunday or Monday. If the non-Jew wants, at the end of the year or at the end of the month, it doesn't make any difference, you can sit down and do a detailed calculation of how much the non-Jew has earned from his Shabbat and how much the Jew has learned from his Sunday. And everyone gets what they earned. If the non-Jew at the end of the month can't be bothered or doesn't want to pay the accountant to sit down and make that detailed calculation of how much each one of them earned, the non-Jew, and it has to be him that decides to do this, the non-Jew can say, let's just split everything 50-50. And then, even if he earned more on Shabbat than you earned on Sunday, seeing as he is giving you as a gift this money, he's saying, let's just divide up in our normal profit sharing ratio, and we're not going to sit and do a detailed calculation of how much was earned on Shabbat and how much was earned on Sunday. There is no problem for you to accept that money. It's clean money, it's pure money, you have no problem with it, and you can take it, and that's the way to do business with a non-Jewish partner. There are many shops that cannot close on Shabbat. They say they can't afford to. This is the solution. By having a non-Jewish partner, he takes all the profits of Shabbat. Now, very often, the profits of Shabbat can be much, much more than the profits of Sunday or Monday. So you can solve this by, instead of having Sunday against Shabbat, have Sunday and Monday against Shabbat, or Monday and Tuesday against Shabbat, to make it realistic. But it has to be that the condition is that everything on Shabbat is the non-Jews, and everything on Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, for example, is the Jews. And if again the calculation can be done, and if the non-Jew wants, the calculation will be done, and he will take Shabbat. And if he doesn't want to do that, if he decides that he doesn't want to do that, then that's fine, and the Jew can take the 50% of the profits, even though it might be money that the non-Jew earned on Shabbat. Now, this condition, seeing as it's a condition of the partnership, this condition must be made at the outset of the partnership. That's the problem when people who've been running a business for years suddenly realize that there's a problem here, and they want to come and arrange this, make this arrangement, that the condition has to be made at the outset of the partnership. You can't put a condition into an existing partnership. So therefore we have to dissolve the partnership and then reform the partnership on this condition. So that's what is done when these contracts are arranged. That's what is done. So how do we do that? We have more contracts, a declaration by the Jewish partners that now the company, the previous company, has ceased to do business. They're dividing it up. They're going to now divide up all the assets between the partners, and then an hour later, half an hour later, they're going to reform the partnership again. They're all going to pool their assets together in the partnership pool together, and they're going to start doing business afresh, anew, and this new business is going to be on the condition that the Goy works on, the non-Jew works on Shabbat, and the Jew works on Sunday against that, like we explained before. So that can be dealt with. That problem we can deal with. Now, a more serious problem can be where you're a partner with a non-religious Jew, or you have a non-religious salesman that's working for you, and he wants to work on Shabbat. He's not prepared to have the business closed on Shabbat. A very, very sad situation. What are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this on a business level? It has to be in such a situation that as far as the religious Jew is concerned, the business is closed on Shabbat. He has nothing to do with what goes on there on Shabbat. He doesn't even, during the week, when he's ordering merchandise, he doesn't order merchandise, stocks, to be sold on Shabbat. He must have absolutely nothing to do with the business being run on Shabbat. And he cannot take any of the earnings on Shabbat. All the earnings must be given solely to the non-religious Jew. He cannot take another day against the day against the Shabbat that the non-religious Jew is taking. Everything that will be earned on Shabbat is just for him, for the non-religious Jew, and the religious Jew is taking nothing of that money. Okay? It's a sad situation. It's certainly not a good situation to get into, but if someone is in that situation, that's the way to deal with it. Again, now where you have a non-religious salesman working for your company, who's going to be going around selling on Shabbat, for example, here as a salesman, if he's working on a percentage, which he has to be working on a percentage, that he's getting a percentage for his sales. If he's getting a salary, then you must tell him not to work on Shabbat. If he's getting a percentage, so he's working for himself. With a non-Jewish salesman, there's certainly no problem. Even with a non-religious salesman, if you're not telling him to work on Shabbat, you don't need to ask him when he closed the deals and when he made his sales. He's getting a percentage, so there will be no problem. Someone told me they were recently asked about a trade fair. A particular trade fair was going to be for 3 days in China, and one of the days was going to be Shabbat, and that was going to be one of the big days, the middle day of the trade fair. He said, I can't close down the booth in the trade fair. We get big orders coming in over there. So the solution that they found, that was suggested over there, was that they should have a non-Jewish salesman there who is getting a percentage for all his sales. So he is there working for himself. Therefore, in such a situation, there would be no problem. The problem now would arise as a separate side problem, where there's a Jewish name to the company. Cohen's. You can't have a company with a Jewish name open on Shabbat. You shouldn't have any part of that, because here there's a separate problem of the Chilul Hashem. The people are going to see a Jewish company, they're going to see Cohen's. Everyone knows that Cohen and Company is a Jewish company, and they see them working on Shabbat, it's a Chilul Hashem. Of course, I must please emphasize that any of these questions that you have a halakha l'maaseh, you must ask a local rabbi, someone who's involved in all the details around your particular business, because a small change in the circumstances can change the way, the answer that you would get to a question of how to deal with these problems in your specific business. So here we're talking generally about how the problem is solved. The main thing I want to get across is that these are problems that can be solved. They can be dealt with halachically. There was a case not so long ago of a Baal Tshuva who was a a partner in a business, in a supermarket. He was a partner in a supermarket that sells treif, like most supermarkets unfortunately do. And they're selling it to goyim, and it's not a problem. But here there's a problem of a religious Jew doing business in treif, in things that he can't eat. So here the solution was that was found for this guy was based on what we did with Shabbat. A division was made between him and his non-Jewish partner. He has a non-Jewish partner. Between him and his non-Jewish partner, that from now on I'm just making a note of something I just remembered I want to mention to you in a minute. That a deal was made with the non-Jew that all the non-kosher foods are the non-Jews, and all the kosher foods, lavdavka kosher with a hechsher, things like bread and things like fruits and vegetables, which don't have a problem that according to the Torah they're not allowed to be eaten. And there are plenty of things like that one can be against the other. All the non-kosher food belongs to the non-Jew. All the kosher food belongs to the Jew. From the time it's ordered, again, it must be possible to make that calculation. We told them to give special code numbers to the non-kosher food and code numbers to the kosher food, the things that are permitted according to the Torah to be eaten, even if they're also d'Rabbanan. As we said at the beginning, the problem here is only with things that you can't eat according to the Torah. They had special code numbers for the different products. A calculation could be made, and the condition was made that all the non-kosher stuff belongs to the goy and the kosher to the Jew. And at the end of the year, if the non-Jew would, rather than sitting down and making a detailed calculation, if he would rather just say that we'll divide the profits according to our previous profit sharing ratio, he can do that, and there's no problem, and you, the Jew, can take the money and enjoy it. There's no problem with that money. Now, the only problem that does arise here is going to be with wines. Wines are going to be a problem of yain nesich. Yain nesich, wines that are not kosher, let's say, have a problem that they're asur ba'ana. A Jew is not allowed to have any benefit at all from such products. So the wines would have to be outside of this deal. The wines are just the non-Jews, and nothing against that from kosher products. And all the profits earned from the wines would just be the non-Jews. With that, there's nothing we can do, because the difference between wine and non-kosher is that with wines, a Jew is not allowed to have any benefit at all from that wine, whereas with non-kosher food, there's no prohibition for a Jew to have any benefit from it. That's the difference between the two. So again, with wines, there's nothing really to be done, and all the wines must just belong to the non-Jew, and all the profits from the wines and the earnings from the wines are just the non-Jews. Now, where a Beit Din or where a rabbi is asked to deal with these matters, to draw up the contracts that are needed, like I said, there's a problem here. When you get first thing you have to do, if the business is already running, you have to dissolve the whole business, make the condition, and then reform the business. There's a question here of kinyanim, of which types of kinyanim, of acts of acquisition, are to be used. Here you're talking about dissolving a company, and the partners have to now divide up all the assets. How are you going to do that? It's a tremendous kinyanim problem here. As you may remember from the first shiurim that we had in this series, there's problems with how you're going to make a kinyan on cash, how you're going to make a kinyan on intangible property like goodwill. What are you going to do with the loans and the debts? There are things that it's difficult. We have difficulties and questions with how to do the kinyanim for these things. The one type of kinyan which solves all of this, and which is very often done in these type of deals, is what we call a kinyan odita, an admission, an odisa. an admission that this property belongs to the other guy. For dissolving the partnership, that's the best way of doing it. It can work for all types of assets, a kinyan or dita, that we, the partners, hereby do agree and declare that the partnership is dissolved and all the assets are being divided up between the partners according to the way a value will value them. This type of kinyan needs witnesses to it. According to many poskim, there should be 2 witnesses to the dissolution and the reforming of the partnership, which also can be done with this same kinyan, the kinyan odisa. If you look back again at the previous shiurim, at the first shiurim that we had, this is mentioned there. In fact, if in Pure Money, chapter 6, page 75, that's where the kinyan odita has been discussed and explained. That's the type of kinyan to be used here, and then you don't need to do a kinyan suda. The problem with the kinyan suda, which is also a good kinyan sometimes for these things, is that you're far away. If you're far away from the people that you're arranging the contracts for, and you can't be there, like we mentioned when we spoke about a kinyan suda, very often people can get confused about who's supposed to give the handkerchief to who, or who's supposed to give the pen to, and they can just make a mess of the whole thing, and it won't be valid and it won't work. So a good kinyan for here is a kinyan odita. One last thing, and then we'll finish today's shiur. One last thing that you can't deal with, apart from treif and Shabbat, is stolen goods. A nice Jewish boy doesn't do business in stolen goods. Not just a nice Jewish boy. According to the halakha, you're not allowed to do business in stolen goods. So I can hear you asking, what's the problem? And if someone else stole them and I bought them from the thief and I didn't know they were stolen, or even if I did know they were stolen, I didn't steal by buying from the thief. Of course I can't steal them and do business in them, but why can't I buy from a thief? The thief's selling them much cheaper. The problem is, like we mentioned before, lifnei yiver lo titen mikshol. You're putting, by being a buyer for stolen goods, you're giving an outlet to the thief, and you're making him steal more. It's not just lifnei yiver lo titen mikshol. It's another problem of helping someone who's doing an aveira. It's considered that you're assisting him in his aveira, in his issur of stealing. By buying from him, you're aiding him and abetting him. He won't steal if he doesn't have who to sell to. By buying from him, you're doing a separate issur of helping someone who's doing an issur. It doesn't make any difference here whether there was yush, there wasn't yush. We're going to get into all that later on in shiurim that we'll have on theft. Here we're just talking about doing business in stolen goods. Of course, if you know, if you don't know, what can you do? You don't know. But where you know or you suspect that the goods are stolen, you should not do business in them, you should not buy them. If you did buy them, you have to ask, we have to see, when we get to the shiurim on theft, we'll deal with what you're supposed to do with them. Our Chazal made a special takanat hashuk, so that the market could work freely, that where you bought in a marketplace goods that turned out to be stolen, you don't have to return them to the owner until you get your money back, the money that you paid back. From him maybe, or from whoever, it doesn't make any difference. Where you bought property in the open market and you didn't know that it was stolen, or you could not have reasonably suspected that it was stolen. There are certain people that when they're selling, you can't buy from them, you know what they're selling is probably stolen. If you bought with good faith on the market something, where it turns out to be stolen property, you don't have to give it back until you are refunded for what you paid for it. That's takanat hashuk, the takanah that Chazal made, in order to help the marketplace work freely, because otherwise buyers would be afraid of buying all the time. Maybe in the future it's going to turn out that what I bought was stolen and I'll lose it and I'll lose my money. That's why they made this takanah. Again, this is only b'diavad, lechatchila certainly, no business should be done with stolen goods, as you're helping the thief by buying the things that he stole. That's the end of today's shiur. Be'ezrat Hashem, in the next shiurim we're going to start getting into the subject of interest.